Thank you very much, and welcome to Wicklow, which really is the heart of the woodpecker story. So this is one of our oak woodlands here in Wicklow. This is in the Clara Vale. Beautiful oak woodland, carpeted with bluebells at different locations, but missing a whole load of key species that you find in every wood in the UK. The most conspicuous one being great spotted woodpecker. Also, species that we don't have, like nuthatch, are species that are very, very rare breeding birds like redstart or wood warbler. So back in 2007, Jason Monaghan, who has returned to Wicklow as a conservation ranger, it's great to have him back, was putting up nest boxes. And he was hammering nails, putting up the boxes into trees. And next minute he heard a bird drumming in response to his hammering. I was like, what is going on? So we have had woodpeckers in Ireland before. They tend to arrive during the winter months. They've always thought to have been birds on what's called an eruption from Scandinavia. So they're birds that have come following the failure of the pine cone crop in Scandinavia in hard winters, and they move west looking for other food sources. But to have a bird in the summer is unusual. So we didn't really do anything about it. It was just filed away as an interesting thing. And the woods still seemed to be fairly quiet. But then we were really caught on the hop when in September 2008, a juvenile woodpecker turned up on a bird feeder in British, which is on the west side of the Wicklow Mountains. And obviously this bird had bred here. This was an Irish woodpecker. It was very unlikely it had migrated. So we'd missed a trick. So it spurred a lot of us on. We formed a small group in Wicklow of people who were just curious about this. And it's incredibly difficult to find woodpeckers, even though they can be incredibly noisy. They're a very visual bird. You can walk through a site where you know you have 4 pairs breeding and hear and see absolutely nothing. So what we got tuned into looking for was their feeding signs. So you can see on these 2 photographs where the woodpeckers have been burrowing into the dead wood, looking for grubs, larvae, beetles, whatever. And we got so good looking at woodpecker feeding signs, we could tell you how fresh they were to probably within a week. And we were still finding it hard to actually see the birds. If you look at the tree trunk on the right, you can see the woodpecker's actually worked his way the whole way up the trunk. It looks like somebody sprayed it with a machine gun. And very occasionally, we never actually got sightings like this. There was always some little bird up the top of a tree, loudly going pick and flying off. And a very characteristic undulating flight through the woods, and then they land smack up onto the trunk of the tree and start to work their way upwards. But we did have some nice views. So this is a male. It has red on the back of his head and a very distinctive red underparts. And we did get good views of them feeding. But trying to find nests and trying to find, first of all, looking for territories, trying to find nests, I don't know if anybody can spot the nest in that photograph. Well spotted. And we finally found what looked like a nest hole. And in May in 2009, Christian Osthoff he found this nest hole and he sat very quietly outside it one morning. And a little head popped out. This is a female. She stuck her head out, the sun shone on her, she just closed her eyes and she rested her beak on the edge of the hole and just had a little doze in the sun. And this was our first confirmed woodpecker nest for the Republic of Ireland. So the pressure was really on that summer because it's a quick turnaround, and by the end of that summer we tracked down several nests and we started to get our eye in on the birds. And you have to admit they're a cracking species. And we eventually got to see chicks. And we learned then a new trick. Instead of spending hours following up on drumming birds, on birds calling and picking, the easiest thing is actually you just wait until near the end of the breeding season, just before the chicks fledge, and they get so loud and so vociferous that you just walk through the wood and you just hear them calling and you walk straight up to the nest. And we thought, if only we'd learned that at the beginning. But it was a long and slow process because they were a new species for everybody involved. And it got that you could actually identify individual juveniles at the nest. You could see differences in them. So what was going on here? Well, in the UK, there has been a huge increase in woodpeckers, which has been documented. And this is thought to be possibly down to the decline in starlings and a lack of competition for nest sites. So you can see the numbers have been increasing. So we thought, wouldn't it be interesting to try and find out where these Irish birds had come from? I know the Irish Wildlife Trust were talking about reintroducing them at one point, and Conor Kelleher swore to me that he did stick a few in his pocket and bring them over here. So we were assuming that they had got here under their own steam. So I sort of thought, well, genetics is obviously the way to go. You know, I'm not a geneticist, I'm a field ecologist. So it's not as easy as it looks on CSI. Ruth Carden very kindly did a bit of research for me, and she found out that actually with very small amounts of material from nests, we're talking about fragments of eggshells or tiny little bits from the tips of feathers, you might be able to get enough DNA out of them to do something genetically. So this was a slippery slope. So we decided, right, at the end of the breeding season, we made a whole load of Heath Robinson kind of gadgets, things for finding things that have fallen down drains, bits of bent wire, double-sided sticky tape, a head for heights, climbing ladders. Definitely health and safety would have issues with this, well overreaching here. And poking down with bits of wires and double-sided sticky tape, we tried to pull whatever we could out of the nest holes. And sometimes we got nothing. But that's the kind of stuff we were fishing out, and eventually that's the kind of stuff we got, which was the holy grail of a tiny little feather. So we stored all that, and then I applied for a bit of funding from the Heritage Council because genetics is very expensive, and we needed a geneticist, and we needed a lab to do it in. And Alan McDevitt was based in UCD at the time, and he very kindly offered to use some of his bench time and bench space to do the genetics for us. And I was thinking, this is great. We have the feathers, we have the DNA. We just put it all in, and it matches up, and it's going to tell us that these birds came from this valley in Wales. It didn't work like that. First of all, we decided we'd try and catch a bird. So we got a license from MPWS before the breeding season started. So we literally had a window of about 2 weeks from when we got colour rings. And then we had to try and catch a bird, which are up in the tops of the trees. So we rigged up an interesting system with a mist net and a slingshot, hauled it up into the canopy, played a tape lure under license, and we caught our first woodpecker. So it was rather exciting, as you can see. And she was duly measured and weighed. It was just so exciting to see a bird in the hand. She was colouring, so this is the only adult we ever got to colouring because it was problems with, we didn't have enough people with licenses, and it's a lot of time and effort, but it would be nice to continue. And you can just see just the feathers on the tail, they're very strong, and they actually help prop the bird up when they're climbing up the trees. They use them as a kind of a perch. And the birds are very robust. They don't mind being handled at all, and they have very sharp beaks. So I had thought we could just match it to a database of great spotted woodpeckers. They're such a common species. They're, you know, almost all the way around the world. All the work would be done. Well, there was nothing to match it to. So I contacted the ringing coordinators across Europe and asked them to contact ringers. And if they had a great spotted woodpecker during the breeding season, when we knew they weren't migrating or moving, could they take a few feathers for us? So word went out, and then all these little parcels started arriving to my house over the summer. So we didn't know what we were going to get or where it was going to come from, but people were fantastic and so supportive. These were woodpecker feathers that had come from a red kite nest that Anne Fitzpatrick collected when they were reintroducing the kites from Wicklow. So we had a huge range of material to work with, and we also looked at some of the museum specimens. And basically what our study showed was that the birds had colonised from the UK. The UK birds do have a continental Scandinavian influence in the population, but they definitely weren't Scandinavian birds that had come to Ireland, so that knocked that one on the head. So this was kind of Dick Coombs, who many of you know as the Countryside Bird Survey Officer in Birdwatch Ireland. He's been brilliant for keeping a tally, and he's been one of the key people in this group of all the different woodpecker sightings in Ireland. And interesting, the Bird Atlas was going on at the same time. So by the time the Bird Atlas was finished and published, you could see all our proven breeding sites clustered mainly around Wicklow. And if you look at the range change, there was also a gain on the Isle of Man, as well as in Ireland. And by the wintering data showed that the birds were starting to spread again. So just to give you a few images. And this is what people in Wicklow are starting to take for granted on their bird feeders. And that's the juvenile with the red head. So Dick and I put a paper together in Irish Birds, so there's loads of detail in that if anybody wants more information. But just to show you some of the interesting nest sites, this was next to a fabulous oak woodland at Dunganstown, and this bird decided to nest in a telegraph pole. And you just think, why? But you can see their favourite tree was oak, lastly telegraph poles. But by 2017, we actually had our first record of a bird using a nest box, which was a purpose-built woodpecker box. And you can see the numbers of nests that we know about have increased. So it's a lot of effort, but they're definitely here. They're here to stay, and they're doing very well. And we've a few counties now claiming nests, but Wicklow's still in the lead. So that's the sort of picture as of 2017. The red dots are confirmed breeding. The blue are potential breeding and other observations. So they are starting to spread out. So you wouldn't know what might turn up. But what we have seen is we have had predation. So one of the nests we lost, there was a pair coming and feeding, and then suddenly there was only a female. And we reckon a sparrowhawk must have got her mate, because the nest went completely quiet. And after 4 or 5 days, we climbed up to it, and we hooked out 5 dead woodpecker chicks, which was a shame to see, but amazing to actually see them. And then over the winter, we started to notice some other predation going on. Something had had a go at getting in at the side of this nest hole. And the birds are very, very clean around their nest sites. You know, this is a female cleaning out a fecal sac. Obviously, this was an egg that failed to hatch, flying out with it. Another fecal sac. But something was having a go. Dick was at this nest site, and there was loads of activity. The chicks were about to fledge. He went back 2 days later to silence and to this. So we had our suspicions as to what it was, and Declan Murphy set up a trail camera, and we had more nests just showing signs of this, and this is the culprit. So it's very interesting because we're delighted to see the pine martins back in Wicklow. We're kind of going, leave our woodpeckers alone, but it's to see the balance of what's going to happen dynamically between all these species in Irish oak woodlands is really only going to unfold. And like we all know about the impacts the pine martins are having on the grey squirrel. The grey squirrels could be raiding woodpecker nests too, we don't know. But of course, you know, what some people are thinking is, well, all these new holes would be lovely roost sites for bats. So this is a Leisler's and a brown long-eared. And I had great hopes last summer to get going with checking old empty nest sites and seeing was bats using them, but I just haven't had the time. So I think there's a little master's project there for anybody who's interested, but hopefully we're going to see lots more juvenile woodpeckers in Irish woods. So thanks to everybody, especially the birds, everybody on the woodpecker team. Dick Coombs gave me some of these stunning shots, and he's just obsessed with woodpeckers. It's a slippery slope. So, and everybody else who is involved, you know, in helping us with the genetics projects, with access, with ringing, with all the different elements. So thanks very much. And there are great spotted woodpeckers in the Glen of the Downs, but very hard to hear them over the motorway. So if you have a walk in the woods, have a look for signs and get your eye in. And if you see any in your neck of the woods, report them to Birdwatch Ireland, please. Thank you.